Good afternoon, and welcome everyone to Beyond Air Financial Results Call for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2020. Today's conference call is being recorded. At this time, I would like to turn the call over to Mr. Corey Davis of Lifestyle Advisors. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you, Devin, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for participating in today's financial earnings conference call for the company's fiscal year ended March 31st, 2020. Leading the call today will be Steve Lisi, Chairman of the Board and Chief Executive Officer of Beyond Air. And joining him will be Douglas Beck, Chief Financial Officer, and Amir Avnil, President and Chief Operating Officer. This afternoon, Beyond Air issued a press release announcing its financial results for the fourth quarter and fiscal year 2020. A copy of the release can be found on the Investor Relations page of the company's website. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that comments and various remarks about future expectations, plans, and prospects constitute forward-looking statements for purposes of the Safe Harbor provisions under the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995. Beyond Air cautions that these forward-looking statements are subject to risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results to differ materially from those indicated. Beyond Air encourages you to review the company's filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission, including, without limitation, the company's Form 10-K, which identifies specific factors that may cause actual results or events to differ materially from those described in the forward-looking statements. As a reminder, again, this conference call is being recorded and will be available for audio rebroadcast on Beyond Air's website at www.beyondair.net. Furthermore, the content of this conference call contains time-sensitive information that is accurate only as of the date of the live broadcast, June 22nd, 2020. Beyond Air undertakes no obligation to revise or update any statements to reflect events or circumstances after the date of this conference call. So with that, I would now like to turn it over to Steve Lisi, the Chairman of the Board and Chief Executive Officer of Beyond Air. Steve.
Thanks, Corey. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Since our last quarterly call in February, Beyond Air, along with the rest of the world, has faced the far-reaching effects of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Our team has been quick to adapt, and I appreciate all their hard work and dedication to the continued advancement of our programs. I also want to thank the healthcare workers in the front lines and hospitals across the country for their relentless work in the ongoing battle with COVID-19. I'm very proud of the fact that in support of the scientific community's efforts to develop effective treatments for COVID-19 and consistent with the known antiviral effects of nitric oxide, or NO, we have initiated our own study of high-concentration nitric oxide as a potential therapy. As we will discuss in more detail in a minute, we have enrolled our first patient in our U.S. COVID-19 study. First, I will provide an update on our lead nitric oxide programs and upcoming milestones. Then I will discuss the new data for our proprietary system to administer nitric oxide at ultra-high concentrations directly to solid tumors that was included in the poster during the XAIR virtual annual meeting today, after which I will hand the call over to Doug to provide a review of our financial results. I want to begin by stating that we are more confident than ever in the potential opportunities we see for our LungFit system. As a reminder, the LungFit has the ability to generate nitric oxide from ambient air on demand and then deliver it to a ventilator circuit or directly to a patient's lungs via a nasal cannula or a breathing mask. This capability differentiates our products from any other offerings in the nitric oxide space to a point where we believe the decades-old cylinder-based delivery systems will become obsolete over time once our first device obtains FDA clearance, which we currently expect to occur in the first half of 2021. Eliminating cylinders allows for the use of nitric oxide anywhere in the hospital, not just the ICU. Eventually, we envision the LungFit being used anywhere there is an electric outlet for conditions that do not require hospitalization. The LungFit has the capability to deliver high concentrations of NO safely, meaning no cylinders or stored NO, and in a cost-effective manner by utilizing ambient air. NO concentrations of 150 parts per million and higher would quickly deplete cylinders of nitric oxide that are used in current NO delivery systems, whereas we essentially have an unlimited supply of nitric oxide with the LungFit system. Our offerings include the LungFit PH for use with ventilated patients requiring nitric oxide due to pulmonary hypertension, the LungFit for high concentration delivery to non-ventilated patients in the hospital setting, and the LungFit Home, which allows patients to self-administer nitric oxide therapy. As a reminder, currently approved NO delivery systems are designed to deliver a maximum of 80 parts per million NO and the current FDA-approved NO concentration is only 20 parts per million. NO concentrations of 150 parts per million and higher provide a broad antimicrobial effect, which we believe can play a key role in the fight against severe lung infections, regardless of the pathogen. Given the current environment, I will begin with our COVID-19 program. We believe our LungFit system's cylinder-free design, ease of NO delivery at the patient's bedside, simplicity for both the respiratory therapist and patient, and the potential effectiveness of higher concentration nitric oxide for treating patients with viral and other infections sets us apart from others trying to solve the COVID-19 problem. Critical questions, in addition to safety and efficacy, are being asked of any therapy being developed during this pandemic, such as the logistics required to deploy treatment quickly over tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of patients. We have the ability to scale up manufacturing quickly. There are no special requirements for LungFit distribution, and the burden on medical staff is low. If NO is proven to be an effective therapy for COVID-19, we believe the LungFit is the only practical solution. As I just mentioned, we see a significant opportunity to use the LungFit system in hospitalized patients diagnosed with COVID-19 caused by SARS-CoV-2. Considering the data compiled to date with high concentration NO, most notably the 3 completed pilot clinical studies in bronchiolitis where infants were hospitalized due to viral infections, we believe that this system could be a significant tool in the battle against this coronavirus. I want to emphasize a point I made earlier. NO is effective against multiple pathogens, and many times patients have co-infections. Thus, a therapy targeting SARS-CoV-2 most likely will not have any effect on other bugs in the lung, whereas nitric oxide most likely have a positive impact. We recently started a study in the U.S. and anticipate enrolling patients for a study in Canada over the summer. The U.S. trial is an open-label study of 20 adult patients hospitalized with COVID-19. Subjects will be randomized 1-to-1 and treated intermittently with 80 parts per million NO administered over 40 minutes, 4 times per day, in addition to standard supportive therapy, or treated with standard supportive therapy alone. This lower dose is designed to rigorously prove the safety of this concentration in only 20 patients before moving to a higher concentration that we feel is going to have a more optimal efficacy profile. The primary endpoint is time to clinical deterioration, measured by the need for non-invasive ventilation or high-flow nasal cannula or intubation. Other endpoints include reduction in viral load, need for supplemental oxygen, hospital length of stay, mortality, safety, and various biomarkers. In Canada, we plan on running a bifurcated study in which Part 1 will assess safety at 80 parts per million NO in up to 10 adult patients, and then, upon the recommendation of a data safety monitoring board, Part 2 will begin, which is designed to assess safety and efficacy at 150 parts per million NO in up to 40 adult patients. Only Part 2 will be randomized 1-to-1. In all other aspects, the design of the Canadian study is very similar to the U.S. study. We are still early in the enrollment period for the U.S. study, and although we are optimistic for a rapid enrollment, it is too soon for us to give accurate projections for the trial's completion. We look forward to updating you as the study proceeds and announcing the results as soon as they are available. From there, once we have established safety in this population, the plan would be to move quickly to a pivotal study upon appropriate consultations with regulatory authorities. Let me now turn to our development program in bronchiolitis, which is the leading cause of hospitalizations for infants worldwide, with over 130,000 hospitalizations annually in the United States alone. With no drugs approved for the treatment of bronchiolitis, this indication poses an important unmet medical need. Just last month, we were excited to announce positive top-line results from our 3rd and final pilot study in bronchiolitis patients. On an intent-to-treat basis, 150 parts per million NO was statistically superior to both the 85 parts per million NO and the control arms of the study for the primary endpoint of time to fit for discharge. For the key secondary endpoint of hospital length of stay, on an intent-to-treat basis, the data also showed statistical significance of the 150 parts per million NO arm compared to the other 2 arms. Lastly, the data showed no difference between the 85 parts per million NO arm and control on either endpoint, underscoring our belief that higher concentrations of NO are required for efficacy in patients with viral lung infections. We look forward to publishing these data, just as the previous 2 pilot studies have now been published. Based on data from the 3 completed studies, we believe this program is ready for a pivotal trial in the U.S. However, due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic over recent months, we have no choice but to postpone the initiation of this pivotal study until some later time when the impact from COVID-19 dissipates. As a reminder, because of the seasonal incidence of bronchiolitis and the need to begin enrollment in the fall, the commencement of this study will not happen until the fourth quarter of 2021 at the earliest. Again, I am very proud of the work our clinical team has done in executing the recent pilot study, as well as the planning for the pivotal study. This brings us to our LungFit PH system, which is currently being developed to address persistent pulmonary hypertension of the newborn, or PPHN, and also in certain cardiac surgery patients outside the U.S. This continues to be our lead program and consumes the vast majority of our engineering, regulatory, and quality team's focus. As we announced on our last earnings call, we're preparing for a U.S. pre-market approval, or PMA submission, for PPHN. I am certain that everyone listening is generally aware of the impact COVID-19 has had on all of us. We at Beyond Air have been working extremely hard to limit the impact to our LungFit PH program. However, the PMA submission timing has been delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic impacting supply chains and logistics for testing. We currently anticipate the PMA to be submitted to the FDA in the second half of 2020. As this submission is a critical inflection point for Beyond Air, I am prepared to say that our target is to get this submission in by the end of September. However, we are not in complete control of this timeline given the overall macro environment in the U.S. today. We will update all of you if this timeline changes on our fiscal first quarter call or sooner if it is warranted. This puts us on track to receive FDA clearance at some point in the first half of 2021, as FDA guidelines state a 180-day review period for a PMA. We would plan to follow immediately with a commercial launch in the U.S. with a partner or on our own. Outside the U.S., partnering discussions are ongoing. I would like to briefly highlight again the operational, safety, and cost advantages of our LungFit PH system over cylinder-based systems. Eliminating cylinders provides the hospital with instant savings on space, inventory requirements, training, employee time, patient time in the ICU, and safety for both the patient and staff. We believe these advantages will position Beyond Air to take a significant share of this market, which is estimated to be more than $300 million in the U.S. and more than $600 million worldwide. In our LungFit Home program, we are planning to initiate a multi-center 12-week self-administered at-home pilot study in 20 patients with non-tuberculous mycobacteria lung infection by the end of 2020. If it were not for the pandemic, this study would be underway, as our original goal was to start in June of this year. In order to be enrolled in the study, a patient may be diagnosed with either a Mycobacterium abscessus complex, also called M. abscessus, or Mycobacterium avium complex, also known as MAC. Patients will be titrated up to 250 parts per million nitric oxide. The study will evaluate safety, quality of life, physical function, and bacterial load. The FDA has emphasized the importance of quality of life improvement and physical function, as well as improved safety profile, as markers of success versus solely eradication of bacteria. Based on our current expectations, we expect to report interim data from the at-home study towards the end of the first half of 2021. Based on the clinical and preclinical data generated to date, we are confident that this pilot study will succeed. Specifically, we are encouraged by the simplicity of our LungFit system, which allows patients to self-administer in the home setting. For the patient, it is a simple 5-step process. Plug the system into any standard electric outlet. Turn on the power switch. Insert the smart filter into the system, place the breathing mask on the face, and press the start button. This is a very straightforward system to use. Recall that our smart filters have an RFID chip that communicates with the system and will dictate the dosing parameters. If this study is successful, we believe our LungFit Home system opens the door to a very significant underserved market for chronic, severe lung infections that can be treated in the home. And with proper resources, we could potentially explore a program in COPD patients with severe exacerbations that are frequently precipitated by an infectious agent. There are over 1 million hospitalizations annually in the U.S. due to exacerbations caused by lung infections in COPD patients. Quite a large unmet medical need. This brings me to the data announcement we issued this morning regarding in vivo and in vitro data that we believe shows the potential effectiveness of ultra-high concentration nitric oxide in treating various solid tumors. These data are from 4 studies, including 1 in vitro and 3 in vivo studies, and were presented today at the XAIR virtual annual meeting. The in vitro study exposed mouse colon and breast cancer cell lines to gaseous nitric oxide, or GNO, versus air and control in order to test if GNO can eradicate cancer cells in vitro. The cells were exposed to up to 50,000 parts per million nitric oxide for up to 180 seconds. Let me repeat this: 50,000 parts per million. This is obviously several orders of magnitude higher than we are using for our pulmonary applications, but we're also not delivering NO to the lungs in this setting and have flexibility to ensure safety for patients and medical professionals. The viability of the cancer cells was then tested 24 hours after NO exposure. Results from the study show that exposure of the cells to 50,000 parts per million NO damaged both colon and breast cancer cell viability by more than 95%. The in vivo studies treated tumors of colon tumor-bearing mice by up to 200,000 parts per million nitric oxide administered locally to test whether nitric oxide can ablate mouse colon cancer tumors. The study reported a complete response in 5 out of 30 mice. In a second in vivo study, colon tumor-bearing mice were treated using 3 different protocols for destruction of the primary tumor. After receiving the nitric oxide treatment for the first tumor, all of the mice then rejected a second cancer cell inoculation. In other words, the data indicate that NO treatment resulted in anti-tumor immunity in the host. Not all of the mice in this study had complete removal of the primary tumor, yet 100% of the mice rejected the second tumor challenge. Hence, we have shown in a small study that local treatment of a tumor with ultra-high concentration of gaseous nitric oxide conveys immunity to the host for that tumor type. We will conduct further studies to confirm this finding, but these data are quite encouraging that we are on a path to prevent tumor metastases. In another study, spleen cells from a tumor-bearing mouse, which was previously treated with gaseous nitric oxide, were mixed with tumor cells and inoculated to naive mice. These spleen cells inhibited tumor growth to naive mice. To be clear, we wanted to see whether the anti-tumor immunity conveyed to the host by NO treatment could be transferred to another naive subject. These positive data provide further confirmation that NO treatment may be working by an anti-tumor immune mechanism. These preclinical studies have provided positive data that high concentration gaseous nitric oxide shows a substantial cytotoxic effect on cancer cells. This innovative gaseous nitric oxide-based therapy represents a novel treatment for cancer and may serve to treat solid tumors locally or be used as an adjunctive therapy for surgery and convey immunity to the host to prevent recurrence and metastases. We also believe gaseous nitric oxide can be synergized with common anti-cancer therapies such as chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and immunotherapy to further enhance the effect. With that, I will now turn the call over to Doug for the financial review. Doug?
Thank you, Steve. Here's a brief review of our financial results for the fiscal year-end March 31st, 2020. Revenue for the fiscal year-end March 31st, 2020 was $1.4 million compared to $7.7 million for fiscal 2019. All revenue is related to the accounting for the payments made to Beyond Air for the now terminated commercial agreement for LungFit PH. Research and development expense for the fiscal year-end March 31st, 2020 were $10.6 million compared to $3.9 million in fiscal 2019. General administrative expenses for fiscal year-end March 31st, 2020 were $8.9 million. Compared to $6.9 million for fiscal 2019. For the fiscal year-end March 31st, 2020, the company had a net loss to common shareholders of $20.5 million, or $1.78 per share, compared to a net loss to common shareholders of $6.6 million, or 77 cents per share in fiscal 2019. As of March 31st, the company had cash equivalents, and restricted cash of $25.5 million. This cash is sufficient to fund operation beyond the next 12 months. During the quarter, we entered into a $25 million line of credit that is available for 2 years. There are 5 available tranches of $5 million each, and the first 2 can be drawn at the company's discretion. The other 3 can only be drawn after FDA approval of LungFit PH. All tranches carry a 10% annual interest rate and warrant coverage of 10 to 25%, with the pricing based on a predetermined formula. The warrant term is 5 years, and all debt has a 5-year term regardless of when the tranche is drawn. We have drawn the first $5 million tranche. Subsequent to the end of the quarter, on May 15th, we entered into a new common stock purchase agreement and registration rights agreement with Lincoln Park Capital for up to $40 million. This new agreement extends until May 2023 and replaces the existing agreements that were set to expire in August 2021. On August 2nd, a prospectus supplement relating to a $50 million at-bid market offering with SunTrust and Oppenheimer was filed with the SEC. These 3 financing vehicles provide us flexibility to draw additional capital as needed to support our activities, developments, and anticipated milestones. I'll now hand it back to Steve.
Thanks, Doug. In closing, we continue to see significant opportunities across our pipeline to address large and mostly unmet medical needs. Our team continues to execute on our programs, including pulmonary hypertension PMA, which is on track to be filed with the FDA later this year. The U.S. COVID-19 study is now enrolling patients, with the Canadian study not far behind. The NTM pilot study with patients self-administering NO at home is expected to be initiated later this year. We completed our 3rd positive bronchiolitis study, and we've shown promising preclinical data in solid tumors. We look forward to the data announcements and clinical milestones expected to occur over the next 12 months. Despite the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on certain clinical programs, Beyond Air teammates and investigators have worked tirelessly to make sure that we will be able to move quickly and resume these programs as clinical sites and regulators resume normal activities. I want to thank them for their dedication to the development of these programs and to the patient populations which we are looking to serve. I'd like to open up your call to questions at this time. Operator?
At this time, we would like to take any questions that you may have. If you would like to ask a question, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. A confirmation tone will indicate your line is in the question queue. You may press star 2 if you would like to remove your question from the queue. For participants using speaker equipment, it may be necessary to pick up your handset before pressing the star keys. One moment, please, as we poll for questions. Our first question comes from the line of Suraj Kalia with Oppenheimer. Please do with your question.
Good afternoon, Steve. Thank you for all the color. Can you hear me all right?
Absolutely, Suraj. Thanks.
So, Steve, 3 questions. First is, forgive me, I must have missed it. The number of patients treated under the U.S. COVID study and the Canadian one, stage 1 of the Canadian study?
So the U.S. study will look to enroll 20 total patients, and the stage 1 of the Canadian study is 10 patients.
And have we treated any so far?
In the U.S.,
the U.S.
yes.
one?
Yeah, in the U.S., yes. Canada, we just got approval from Health Canada recently, so it's going to take a little more time to get the sites up and running. But,
in the timing for the U.S. study, did you talk, forgive me, I must have missed that remark.
Well, we just said that it's kind of hard to nail down an exact timing of completion of the study, given the environment that we're in. I mean, I'm sure everybody, as you see, patients pop up in different places at all times. It's kind of a guessing game where they're going to be, and there are lots of companies out there that are competing for these patients. So we didn't give a timeline for completion of the study.
Fair enough. The PPHN PMA, Steve, by end of September, the filing, if I heard you correctly, what all remains to be done between now to the actual submission?
So, this has been a logistical nightmare for coordinating all of the testing, shipping of equipment and systems, moving people around, because you need obviously highly skilled people who understand what we're trying to do here. So that's pretty much what's left to be done, is getting all of these tests done and, getting all of the final parts and pieces in for the final manufacture of the last few systems. So you manufacture systems for testing, then you manufacture systems when the testing's completed. So these are the things that we're dealing with in terms of logistics on those, on both of those, basically. Then we're just kind of in the home stretch here, and we just can't, you can see the finish line, you're just kind of running in place right now, if you can imagine. So things are opening up, and we've got timelines from a lot of our partners out there, and it looks like we are on track to get this done before the end of September. And the only thing I can say to that is, we don't control what may happen if things get shut down again, or if things get delayed because of COVID or any other potential reason. I mean, there have been difficulties in getting certain things done, not just due to COVID, but due to a lot of the protesting that's been going on. Has also been difficult to manage around that sometimes. So we're kind of at the mercy of the environment outside of our control. But if we can keep our timelines that we have right now, we'll be fine for September. So right now, as long as nothing goes wrong from that perspective, we keep reopening COVID. The COVID pandemic stops, and we keep reopening on schedule as everybody's talking about. We should be fine. It's just not in our control.
Right. Steve, two others, and I'll hop back in queue. One is your updated expectations on a panel for PPHN, if there has been any change. And the second thing, and we can certainly take it offline, if need be, I was just curious about the data, preclinical data you'll presented today in solid tumors. I mean, it's a fascinating concept, and I think the one thing that I wasn't able to connect the dots is, how do you do intratumoral injection of gaseous nitric oxide, or, when you try to ablate, how are you going to do that? Just mechanistically, if you could explain, we can certainly take it offline. Thank you for taking my questions, and congrats again.
Thanks, Suraj. I was caught up in the cancer. What was your first question?
Just your thoughts on a PPHN panel, if any.
Oh yeah, the panel. Yeah, we don't expect to have a panel. I mean, there's no human data. I'm not sure what we'd be discussing if we had a panel. There's nothing to discuss. This is all about having all of our paperwork and all of our reports and everything in order, having all of our testing done, in the proper manner, and getting our pre-approval inspection of our contract manufacturers. And that's really what's happening here. There's no human data to discuss, so we don't think there's going to be a panel at all. We don't expect one. We never expected one, and we're working with FDA to make sure that we get our PMA, submission to be pristine. So it's not an expectation at all on our side. So with respect to cancer, I mean, we probably should take it offline, and I can get you on the phone with some of my team members to walk you through. But we mentioned we had a proprietary delivery system. We also mentioned that we had 3 different methods for delivery. So yeah, it's still a question mark. How do you keep the nitric oxide from spreading beyond the tumor? We're not going to tell you how we do it. We're not going to let anybody know how we do it. Not yet, anyway. But that's definitely something you have to be concerned with. Nitric oxide at those high concentrations will kill anything. It's not just going to kill the cancer cells. We don't have some kind of a biomarker where it's drawn to inside the tumor. I mean, there are several ways to get it directly to the tumor. We're just not really going to go into detail on how we're doing it right now. But it is, we did mention it's intratumoral delivery. So the nitric oxide is kind of set inside the tumor mass itself, and it kills from the inside. So, obviously as time goes on, we'll reveal more and more, but, happy to get you on the phone with my team if there's some other questions.
Great. Thank you.
Our next question comes to the line of Matt Tapper with Ladenburg Thalmann. Please proceed with your question.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for taking the questions. Hope you're doing well.
Thanks, Matt.
Just wanted to dig in a little bit more to Suraj's question in terms of PMA, what needs to be done to complete the filing. I guess specifically, has the pre-approval inspection of the contract manufacturers been scheduled yet? And
well, that doesn't happen, Matt, until you actually submit the PMA. So you have to submit the PMA to FDA before you get on their schedule. So we have to make sure that we have to complete all testing. So as you can imagine, starting in the middle of March, everything was shut down. And things get backed up and everybody wants to, get to the starting line when things open back up. So, that's what we're in position to do. And, these vendors are doing their best to open back up. They're all over the country. Sometimes you get lucky or unlucky depending on which site of theirs you were scheduled to be in. If you're scheduled to be in a place where there's not a lot of COVID, then that's great. Scheduled to be in a place where there's a lot of COVID, that's a problem. If you're scheduled to be in a place where there's been a lot of protesting, it's a problem. If you're scheduled to be in a place where there's not a lot, it's not a problem. So these are things that just, you couldn't have predicted, 4 months ago when you were setting up all these logistics. You couldn't think of these things impacting your business plan. It's kind of a, global pandemic is a new one for us. I'm sure it is for everybody. You kind of don't expect it. You don't really know how to plan for it. So, we've reacted well. We're keeping these timelines, pretty tight, in terms of, a couple months delay here. It could be much worse. And we've worked very hard with our suppliers and partners out there to make it a very short delay. So, again, I don't know what else you want me to say in terms of testing. I mean, we could rattle off 15 different tests, but, it's just, electrical safety and, human factors, things like that. This is a medical device, remember.
Right. So has any of the testing been completed, or you need to, every test that's necessary for submission of PMA still needs to be done?
No, some testing has been done. Sure. I mean, we're in Madison, Wisconsin, our engineers they've been rolling. They haven't missed a day. I mean, they're in the office, they're in the lab, doing everything they can do. But you have to understand that they don't have everything in house. We don't have, even if we were 10 times the size company, you still have to have some outside vendors doing some of these tests. Sure. Can't do them all on your own. Some of them, these have to be validated, testing houses on some of these tests. So we have to go outside no matter what.
Just shifting gears in terms of...
Wait, Matt, can I mention one thing, Matt?
Yeah.
All the testing for our lung fit system that we're using for COVID, that we're going to be using for NTM, that's passed all of the tests. All of them. That one's been perfectly tested. All the tests, it's been done. I mean, this is just our ventilator-compatible system, so we have to repeat all the tests for the ventilator-compatible system. We've done the tests for the other system already, and we've passed. Great.
Yeah, just really kind of getting them done is the thing. So help us understand what were the learnings from the third bronchiolitis pilot study versus the first two. What did you learn that's new specifically from the third study?
Well, the third study had 85 parts per million NO in it, so that's we would consider a low concentration of nitric oxide when you're looking to have an antiviral effect. And what we saw was that there was no effect on these infants. So that's something new, that there seems to be a dose response, and we can show that 85 parts per million had no effect versus control, and 150 parts per million was statistically significant on the primary and key secondary endpoint, which is hospital length of stay. I mean, this is a small study. It was 89 patients in 3 arms, so we weren't expecting to hit, these robust p-values, but the effect was so strong that we hit it. So, I would say that, one, we certainly learned that you have to get to higher concentrations to have this effect, number one. And number two, I think that by the third study, the team, the engineers on our side have learned, how to maximize, the situation. I mean, these are infants. They move around quite a bit. We learned, we went from 5 times a day to 4 times a day in treatment, so it's one less treatment. They got more rest. You didn't have to, annoy them 5 times. You're only doing it 4 times. we used a new mask. We adjusted the breathing circuit, so we did a lot of tweaks here and there for the system. And you see the results are extremely strong. So this study taught us how to run a much better study and fine-tune the equipment. And it also taught us, or it didn't teach us, it confirmed to us what we already knew,